It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show, only on Secular Media Network.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. I'm going to bump what I was expecting to talk about this episode and talk a little bit about how the broker-dealer industry works, fees, expense ratios, mutual funds, a whole lot of different things, maybe including wrap fees. And this is all inspired by an email I got, and I don't know that I want to use his name, so I'll just call him Bob. Bob sent me an email, and he works for a large broker-dealer, and it was interesting. We had a few emails back and forth, and I guess I started off a little snarky. It can happen, and he's been kind enough to respond to my responses in a way that was politer than I probably deserved. So, Bob, thank you for that. I do appreciate that. And I'm just going to kind of go through the context of the email and give you some opinions on my thoughts and some of his responses. First of all, he said that he's not going to disclose the broker-dealer that he works for. I think that was a wise choice, Bob, because I would probably talk about them, and I think that wasn't really his intent. He's been working for a broker-dealer for a few years now, so he's relatively new to the business and helps the company service the clients. And so some of that perspective comes from him. He also mentions that he's working on getting a CFP designation, and I think I've talked about this on the show before, but it may have been a while. CFP is a certified financial planner, and it's one of those things that I don't place a whole lot of value in. It's not a bad idea, but I don't place a whole lot of value in it. The CFP is a program created by an outside company, and they create a program that you have to go through and learn and study all this material, and it's decent enough material. And once you've learned all the material, you take the test that they administer. And so you pay a company to take a test, and that company also sells you the material to teach you for the test, and once you've passed it, you have a CFP. It talks a lot about morals and what's the right and wrong thing to do, but there's absolutely nothing to prevent anyone from passing the test and then still behaving immorally or putting you in bad investments. So it's nice, it's not bad, but it's one of those things that I don't see a whole lot of value in it. I think there's, for me, more value in the experience of knowing how things work and experience in years in the business, and someone who's really got their heart in the right place, I guess. I think that's more important to me. The next thing that Bob has in his original email is that he has the phrase, I always try to act in my client's best interest. And my question was, why try? Why not actually do? And he was very kind and came back and explained that there is a structure that he has to work within, and sometimes there's limitations, although he seems to think that the broker-dealer that he works for is, pretty nice guys. I don't know them. He didn't give me their names, so it's hard for me to know for sure, but his response sounds pretty reasonable. And he's explaining that because he is new and doesn't have his own, what they call, book of business in the brokerage firm, he happens to work with people who are already clients of the broker-dealer, but probably their broker-dealer left or they're too small for one of the fancy-schmancy guys who's been around 20 years to deal with. So he says that there's basically two ways that they can do this. One is a portfolio where they might have loaded funds, ETFs, stocks, bonds. Commissions for individual trades can be $75, and he doesn't get any of the commissions or sales charges or the 12B1 fees that often accompany a lot of these funds. That goes to the company, and of course they pay him a salary. And so that can actually help to remove a lot of the potential conflict of interest, at least from the individual salesperson, individual advisor, individual broker's perspective, because he is not getting paid varying amounts based on the advice that he gives. So I do like that. The unfortunate thing for a client of this company, they're still paying what I consider to be too high of expenses. Bob then goes on that says that there's a second way that they're doing it now, which is becoming more common, and I've talked about this, is that they do what's called, at least in the broker-dealer business, a wrap fee. And they charge 1%, and on top of that 1%, or with that 1%, that covers all your costs and fees and expenses. And that in his email, he says that their firm will not allow you to sell funds that have 12b1 fees inside of a wrap account. And that's fine, and I'm delighted to hear that, but I know there are cases where a person will pay the wrap fee, which is basically really close to being the fee that someone might pay me. So I can't complain about that too much because that would make me a hypocrite, and they get paid that. And if that's all that they get, that's fine. And if that's all disclosed and clear and someone chooses to pay that, I'm cool with that. I mean, I have to be. That's what I do. But I have also seen cases where, unlike Bob's situation, where the client pays 1% or 1.5%, and I've seen even up to 2.5% and 3% fee for the wrap fee in the broker-dealer world, or the investment advisor fee in the registered investment advisor world that I'm in. But then there are other fees. 12b1 is one of them that he says his broker-dealer doesn't allow them to do. 12b1 fee is part of the high expense ratio of high expense ratio funds, and it was created as a way to help sales companies, broker-dealers, financial industry, mutual fund companies. They actually take money from you for the purpose of marketing the products. And the original idea was that if more people invested in mutual funds, the mutual fund costs would go down, and eventually customers, clients, people would pay less money for mutual funds. Well, the ironic thing, of course, is that the 12b1 fee and general expense ratios over the decades have gone up, despite the massive growth of the industry. So 12b1 fees often just turn right around and go back to the advisor or the salesperson as additional compensation. He is telling me that they do not get paid that way. At least he does not get paid that way. If other people in his industry or business get paid that way, I don't know, but I do know that people are paying it. So, different companies can behave in different ways. So I guess that kind of makes sense. He says that he and his firm are welcoming Department of Labor charges, and that's great. The Department of Labor rules, I might say, where they have to act as a fiduciary. And of course, my question is, if they're welcoming those rules, why aren't they acting that way already? And it's mostly because they haven't had to. They've focused on following the rules that were in existence, and they think they're doing a pretty good job, but they're going to have to make some changes. So again, based on Bob's description, his broker-dealer sounds pretty reasonable compared to many that I see. And there's definitely the possibility that I have a selection bias effect. The people that bring me their portfolios have the worst portfolios. Because if you are, if the market makes 12 and you make 12, you're probably not going to come to me and say, what the hell is going on with my portfolio? But I do see all the time when the market makes 12, like it has roughly over the last 3 to 5 years, people bringing me portfolios that are making 5, 6, and 8% per year. And they wonder, where is their money going? And that's often what I talk about, and that's often what I see. So maybe in his case, it's not so bad, but I don't have the actual details of what they're doing. In a previous episode, I had talked about how one of my future clients, or someone who listens to the show, had talked about their advisor saying they were going to switch from A shares to C shares when the new Department of Labor rule hit. And Bob's position is that their brokerage firm would never allow that, which is very reasonable. Just a real quick summary, A shares generally have a higher load up front, and C shares have a lower load or a back-end load, sometimes no load, but have higher expense ratios on an ongoing basis. So if you bought the A shares, and I assume willingly paid the load up front, you do get a lower ongoing expense ratio. So if you switch from A to C, you paid all your money up front and then you pay the higher expense ratio. So if your advisor ever suggests that you do that, or that might be part of their solution to the fiduciary rules that are coming out in April of 17, you should fire that advisor. That's pretty straightforward. And Bob says that they would not allow that. Well, that is absolutely fantastic. One part where I think Bob got it a little wrong, and we actually talked about this back and forth in email, is that he mentioned that I recommend or favor index funds and ETFs. I do favor index funds. I'm not a big fan of ETFs. ETF in and of itself, that's an exchange-traded fund. An ETF in and of itself is not necessarily a good thing. It's basically a mutual fund that's sold a different way. It's sold in real time on the markets. And the single biggest advantage an ETF has is that you can buy and sell within a given business day. I think personally the single biggest problem an ETF has is that you can buy and sell within an individual day. One of the things that I often find that keeps people from success is trading. It's a classic age-old thing. Buy and hold, buy and hold. You should buy and hold. Make some adjustments along the way, but don't thrash around like you're in quicksand because you'll just sink. So ETFs include that feature, which then encourages people to actually go and trade. We recently had the panic over the Brexit where for 2 or 3 days the market went down. If you saw that and jumped out, in the next 2 or 3 days when the market went right back up, you missed all of it. So that's one of the reasons I don't like ETFs. Another thing that I did point out, and I have found them in one of the companies I mentioned a few weeks ago, was called Tuttle Tactical Management. They follow a tactical philosophy where they want to avoid market drops. And so they're constantly buying and selling and trading inside of the ETF, which, of course, if you're in a taxable account, you're going to get crushed with high taxes if you're in a high tax bracket. If you have very low income, it's not going to be as big a deal, but you're going to pay 25, 35, 40, 45% taxes versus 15% in capital gains. Over the last 12 years, their fund that is trying to outsmart the S&P 500 has lost 8%, while the S&P 500 went up 4%. So tactical doesn't work, and this index fund or this ETF charges 1.34% expense ratio. So ETFs aren't necessarily cheap either. Often there are a lot of ETFs that mirror index funds that are really, really low cost and sometimes a fraction of a bit cost lower, but there's also very expensive exchange-traded funds. So just because it's an ETF doesn't mean it's good for you or that it's efficient or that it works or that it's a low cost. Bob then asks, he hasn't heard me talk about my wrap fee. Well, and this is something we've gone back and forth a little bit about. A wrap fee applies usually to a broker-dealer, although it can apply to an investment advisor. But a wrap fee is a flat percentage that covers all costs and advice within a broker-dealer, including trading costs. So normally with registered investment advisors, like for my situation, and maybe this is a little more technical than you want, so forgive me, I provide the advice. I can see in my clients' accounts. I can trade within my clients' accounts, but I don't hold them. So when you go to a Morgan Stanley or an A.G. Edwards or Edward Jones, and I have no idea if Bob works for any of these guys, they are the broker-dealer. They are the advisor. It's one and the same. So they can bundle all these services together for one flat fee, and hopefully that would be the only thing that you pay. But like I said, I've seen cases where that's not. For me, I'm independent of the broker and dealer that holds the money. That's, for me, it's TD Ameritrade. So they will charge whatever they charge for transactions. Now, they're a discount broker, so I think the costs are pretty small, but they handle all the paperwork. They do all the legal requirements. They do all the filing, and they provide the platform where my clients can log in and sign. And one of the basic rules of my world is never fucking send Phil money. I help you with money, but don't send it to me. So you send it to TD Ameritrade in my case, and it's held there by them in your name. And if someone that's hiring me decides they don't like me, that I'm an asshole or I'm incompetent, whatever it is, or they've